I love the smell of diesel in the morning. But have you ever wondered why these big trucks tend to explode when your normal everyday gas vehicle just sort of smokes when things go wrong? Have you ever wondered like, hey, what's the difference between gas and diesel anyway? And why do we always see diesel big rigs and stuff, but never see any like diesel sports cars? Well, I'm Trav, the official Ideal Cars car whisperer, and I'm here to help you out. Welcome to Launch Control. The stuff inside your fuel tank is important. It like fuels your internal combustion engine or something. But it's not that easy, is it? Because you have to choose from either gas or diesel. And if you choose wrong,
give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Ooh.
So what's the difference? Why won't your gas-powered car run on the same stuff that powers big rigs? Gas, diesel, let's get into it. Okay, starting with the easy stuff. Gasoline and diesel are both petroleum products. They're both liquids, unless something's gone horribly wrong, and they burn.
Hands up in the fire, burn, 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 burn.
Which means engines like them. Inside an engine, both gas and diesel are compressed, blown up, and then the waste product is pushed out the exhaust. Seems simple enough. It's like that energy drink you're slamming to finish that all-night study sesh. Gas and diesel are both liquids that let you do stuff. Or your car, rather. Guys, don't drink automotive fluids. They're not the same. They do similar things, but they are not the same. See, when oil gets pumped out of the ground, it's basically like this thick, black, amazing syrup that's full of carbon and dinosaurs and other dead things. You can't put that directly in your car. Well, I mean, you could, but you're gonna have a bad time. What we've gotta do to make it something we use in our cars is refine it. Maybe you've seen oil refineries around your town. Those things are filtering, heating, and refining the crude oil that gets pumped out of the ground into things like gas, diesel, and plastic. It's all really sciencey and stuff, and it's actually a really cool process, but this isn't a college course on petroleum. The simplest explanation is that diesel is less refined than gas. It's like a big scale. When the crude oil comes in, it's more like used engine oil. Then you heat it up and make it more like normal engine oil. Then you heat it a little more and it's diesel, and then a lot more and it's gasoline. Each time it gets refined, the amount of impurities get reduced. So unlike my diet, gas has a lot less garbage in it than diesel or engine oil. That means when you burn diesel, it farts out all that garbage into the atmosphere in the form of soot and carbon compared to the much cleaner burning gas. But since diesel is pretty close to engine oil, it helps lube the pistons while the engine runs. And more importantly, the unrefined nature of the diesel means it has a higher energy density. So what does that mean? Well, that means if you burn 1 ounce of diesel and 1 ounce of gasoline, more heat energy will be released by the diesel burning. So if you're toasting marshmallows, grab the diesel tank, not the gas tank. Petrolicious. Now, gasoline does burn faster because it's more refined, but that doesn't translate into more energy over time. And this is where we start to paint the picture, right? Gas burns faster, but doesn't release as much energy. So you have to burn more of it and turn the engine faster to get work done. Whereas with diesel, you can turn the engine slower and burn less of it to get the same result. Which is why your high-revving, fuel-slurping monster Supra runs on gas, but your slow-revving, fuel-sipping Jetta TDI runs on diesel.
Volkswagen, das Auto.
The high energy density in the diesel has another cool feature. You don't need spark plugs. Nah, you just squish it until it gets so hot and dense, it auto ignites and explodes. Like the volcano you built in science class. I was sick that day, so I never got to. You can't really squish gas that much. If you do, it will also set itself on fire, but it's specifically designed to not combust on compression and heat alone. The molecules in gasoline are spaced out differently, and it's just too unstable to reliably ignite at the same pressure and temperature. So instead, we squish it a little bit during the compression cycle, then light it on fire with a spark. See our Engines Explained video for more about that. How does all that affect our Supras and diesel-powered Volkswagens? Well, the Supra has lower compression because it's designed to run on gasoline, something like 8.5 to 1. Low enough that the fuel doesn't want to initiate a burn without the help of a spark plug. And the TDI has a higher compression because it's a diesel. We're talking like 19 to 1 or higher. So a diesel engine has higher compression, turns lower RPMs to make the same power, uses less fuel, and doesn't need spark plugs. Although they usually have glow plugs, which are like little heaters to help heat up the cylinders when it's cold out. Meanwhile, a gas engine has lower compression, can turn higher RPMs, and needs an electrical system to fire the spark plug, which neat. What does that mean though? Well, for one thing, At its core, a diesel engine is way less complicated than a gasoline engine. Just imagine if you took the gas engine in your car and removed most of the tubing and electrical. You don't have to use coil packs or a distributor to time anything. No plugs, wires, or ignition control of any kind. And the fuel delivery method can be much simpler because all you have to do is squirt some diesel into the cylinder via a pump that runs mechanically off the engine itself, and compression does the rest. That means there's a lot less that can go wrong. And coupled with the fact that diesels just simply move less than their gas counterparts, remember, lower RPMs to make power means fewer cycles of the engine, means less wear. Diesels tend to last a lot longer than gas engines. That whole no spark plug thing is why you can sometimes get those runaway diesels. On a normal gasoline engine, the way you stop the engine from running is by killing the ignition. You make it so the spark plugs can't spark, and the engine is like, ugh, I give up. On a diesel, you can't do that. The engine's more than happy to run without spark, so long as it's getting air and fuel. The problem is that, remember, diesel fuel is a lot like engine oil, and you've got engine oil in the crankcase. So in the event that the engine starts to run away uncontrollably, even if you shut off the fuel supply, if it starts spinning quickly enough to start ingesting engine oil, well, the engine's more than happy to just suck all that in and use it up as fuel while exploding, which is awesome. I mean, totally sucks if your truck explodes, but you have to admit, pretty cool.
Nope.
The only way to 100% stop a runaway diesel engine is to cut off all airflow. And since most diesel engines don't even use a throttle body, they don't have to because we control RPM through injection quantity, well, it's easier said than done. Your TDI has one for this exact reason though. Most diesels just don't. Further, since a diesel engine is designed to run on basically garbage, you can run it on garbage. That's why vegetable oil is a perfect substitute for refined diesel. So is kerosene or jet fuel. Hell, it'll even run on gas if you want. Not well, and it'll definitely smoke your injection pump and cause catastrophic damage. And it's not easy because you need to heat up the cylinders enough to get the gas to combust under pressure, but a modern diesel is totally capable of it. On a more practical note, diesels tend to make way more torque, thanks to that higher energy density, and use less fuel while making that torque. So you get better MPGs. We all love MPGs, right? In short, diesel vehicles tend to be more reliable, able to burn a variety of fuels, tend to make more torque, and usually get better MPGs, which, great. Why don't we all use diesels? Well, because there are some downsides. First, you have to build a pretty beefy engine to contain all that extra combustion, and that means diesel engines can get really, really heavy. That's honestly a big reason you tend to only see them in like big, heavy vehicles. Sure, they make more low-end power, but they have to use more of that power just to move themselves. On a big rig, that doesn't make much of a difference. On a Corolla, you're losing performance. All that extra engineering and material means they're also more expensive, like over $9,000 more expensive in the case of the new Ford F-250.
9,000?
And nowadays, unfortunately, modern diesels are even more complicated than their gasoline counterparts. Now, in order to offset that unburned garbage that we talked about before, your everyday modern diesel has things like diesel exhaust fluid tanks and systems, and complicated engine monitoring systems that put generic OBD2 to shame, and a whole lot of extra parts just to make it better for the earth. And more importantly, make more power. Remember guys, when you roll coal, what you're really doing is making your amazing piece of modern technology run like that's not cool. And if you have an older diesel, just swap the complexity with higher pollution. Older diesels are incredibly simple and easy to understand, but they lack the emissions equipment that modern ones have. So they dump a lot of nasty stuff into the air, like sulfur, carbon, and nitrogen oxides, and out of the box make substantially less power than their modern counterparts, until you start to tweak them. At the end of the day though, it's really two things. They're heavy and they cost a lot. That's where your bog standard gasoline engine comes in. See, gas is cheap. Well, not so much right now, but it's cheaper than diesel to buy. The engines are cheaper to make, and the whole system can use cheaper materials. And that's basically the reason we use gas at all. See, back in the way back days, people were experimenting with all sorts of kooky stuff. Ferdinand Porsche, yeah, the Porsche, was even building these hybrid electric cars that ran on batteries and peanut oil in the late 1800s. Suck it, Prius. But Ford sort of decided that gas was the future because gas was cheap as fuck. And here we are. Even with all the advances in electric car tech, they're still way more expensive than their internal combustion counterparts. And here in the United States, gas-powered cars tend to actually be cheaper to operate in the long run. Also, it's arguably easier to make more power from a gas engine. Now, I know that diesel has a higher energy density, but it's hard to extract every ounce of the power. Some companies, like Audi, who has diesel race cars, have gotten really good at it. In general though, RPMs are kind of the kings of performance. If you can get an engine to turn higher RPMs, it doesn't matter if it makes a little less torque. It will make a lot more horsepower, and horsepower is what wins races. Mostly. I think since most of you drive gas cars, you already know the downsides. But let's touch on them real quick, just to be sure. First off, even though it's cleaner than diesel, it's still not clean. There's a lot of waste that's generated by the process of turning oil in the ground into fuel you can use in your car. More, in fact, than turning that same crude oil into diesel. Second, their biggest strength is also their biggest weakness. Revving higher and running hotter to make more power means they tend to wear out faster. Not all the time. There are big lazy V8s like the UZ and the million-mile Lexus that are crazy robust, but in general, a gas engine will need to be rebuilt long before a diesel. Third, they just burn way more fuel. Here in the States, which is a qualifier I made before, it doesn't really matter because diesel's still more expensive. And so they work out to be like the same cost over time. Over across the pond though, both gasoline, also known as petrol as they prefer, and diesel cost a lot more. And because of that, it's significantly cheaper to have, say, a BMW 3 Series diesel that gets 40 miles per gallon over a standard 3 Series that gets 32. In fact, nearly 20% of cars in Europe are diesels, compared to, I mean, I knew it was low, but 3% here in the States. Yeah, so gasoline cars get worse fuel economy, don't last as long, and gas is worse to make. So which should you choose? Well, if you're here in the US, you really only have to choose if you're buying a truck, and only you can decide if the extra pulling power is worth the jacked up price. If you're across the pond though, you'll probably be choosing electric.
What a twist!
Oh no, I said the bad word. But we can't really talk about gas versus diesel without talking about the future. Right now, there are a bunch of alternative fuels being developed, which are different than the alternative medicines your weird smelling aunt tries to tell you about. No, they're fuels that are created in a lab and are not made from crude oil. We already have some of those. One's called ethanol and alcohol, made primarily from corn here in the States, that works as a pretty good substitute for gas. And then there's also biofuels, which hippies have been making from leftover McDonald's grease forever. And that's not to be confused with biodiesel, which is a brand name now because nothing sacred, which is supposed to be a renewable, lab-developed, clean-burning diesel replacement, which seems really awesome because it would be a way to keep our internal combustion cars on the road a lot longer. It's still in development, but with names like Porsche behind it, I'm hopeful. Other alternative sources for fuel include hydrogen, which has its own issues, natural gas, and propane. Now, those are really all topics for another video because the truth is, all of those technologies are losing the race. Electricity is winning. Now, I know a lot of you aren't excited for that. It's why we made this awesome Save the Pistons t-shirt, but there are numerous countries already where EVs outsell combustion cars. Now, I think there's a really strong case for using some of these engineered fuels for performance cars and to keep the cars we all love on the road without upsetting Greenpeace. But I also think that in a few short generations, there won't be a gas versus diesel debate. Pour one out for Rudolf Diesel, who we honored by naming a fuel after, but in reality, is basically the father of the internal combustion engine. Man, that's not how this is ending. Let's get another one of those runaway diesel explosions in here. Hell yeah. There we have it, boys and girls. What powers your current car? Are you happy with it? Are you considering swapping to a different powertrain with your next car? Let us know in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Let us know how we're doing and comment on some of the other content you'd like to see. Want to learn more about diesels? What about alternative fuels? Let me know and maybe we'll get into it. This is Trav. Thanks for watching this episode of Launch Control. We'll see you guys next time.